Let's get things started now in the UK, where British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Labour leader Keir Starmer have faced off in their televised debate ahead of the UK election. Both leaders went head-to-head over issues from health to immigration and ethics, and struggling to be heard above a noisy protest outside. The debate took place in the central city of Nottingham and represented Mr. Sunak's last big opportunity to give his right-wing Conservatives, who are trailing Labour by about 20 points, a fighting chance in the July 4th polls. He accused Starmer of taking people for fools over Labour's plans to reduce immigration, while Starmer also accused the Prime Minister of one of the country's wealthiest men of being out of touch and too rich to understand the concerns of most common Britons. While the two leaders have met at several debates and public sessions with voters increasingly focusing on who is better suited to lead the country. British voters are choosing 650 lawmakers for the House of Commons, and the leader of the party that secures a majority of seats, either alone or in coalition, will become Prime Minister of the UK. Let's dissect and make sense of all of this. Joining us is a political commentator, Dr. Tony Agbon's a senior lecturer at the Anglo-Ruskin University in London. Doctor, wonderful and great to see you again. But I wonder, what's your assessment of these final debates between the Prime Minister and, of course, the Labour leader, Mr. Starmer?
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Listening to your initial report there, that was very robust. And like you alluded to, the debate yesterday in Nottingham was very fierce, it was passionate, it was argumentative. For all the elements of what a debate should be and how it should be, they were present. A lot of fireworks, both from the current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and then his main challenger, Keir Starmer. They were firing on all cylinders. And we were all watching here all over the UK. Everybody was glued to his television set, those on radio, and trying to make sense of what these two men were saying. Because anyhow you look at it, one of them is certainly going to be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom come July 4th, 2024. So the debate was interesting, and depending on which side of the divide every British citizen belong. Some were saying that Sunak won the debate, others were saying it was Starmer that won the debate. But key issues were discussed, and I'm sure as we go in this conversation...
because I'm just going to take you up on that, Doctor, because, you are in London, and I'm just wondering perhaps what exactly are the striking issues. What's at stake here as these two men fight to become Prime Minister? For Rishi Sunak, a second time. So what were the major issues that drove the debate?
Yeah, the key issues, and which affect the life of those of us who live in the United Kingdom, they are just very simple. Number one is the economy. Number two is healthcare, immigration, and then tax. So those are the four main issues. And during that debate, you could see that both Rishi Sunak and Starmer, they were touching on these issues. So when you look at the United Kingdom, it's a pure welfare state. So there's a lot of state support for citizens here, those who are vulnerable, those who are not working, or those who have some health challenges and are not able to work. The government gives a lot of support. So, but the challenge in the United Kingdom, at least for the years I have lived there, is government increasingly is finding it difficult to fund some of these things. So in the debate yesterday, a lot of the questions that people were throwing at them was, how are you going to fund some of these promises you are making now? So for the economy, in the last 14 years, the Conservative Party have been in power. So a lot has happened. Some of them self-inflicted. Some of them, as a result of things that are happening externally in the global economy, has really made life a bit difficult, really difficult for people. Cost of living is very high here. Inflation at the time was even beyond, was in double digits. It was above 10%. So these were the issues. So who is going to tackle it more? Sunak was very, very very much on the front foot yesterday. He was, attacking Starmer. And I was saying that for UK voters, if they vote for the Labour Party and they come to power, taxes are going to increase. Households are going to pay like £2,000 extra in tax, which if you convert that in Nigeria currency, which is going to close to about 4 million naira if you convert it. So these were the issues. But Starmer on his side was saying that is not what he's going to do. So there was that back and forth there. Then when you look at the economy itself, so people are looking at who has the best program. And for most people in the UK, 14 years of the Conservative government, and this is what happens in this country over time. People are already, drained of the party. They just want something new. And recent polls that have just been done by the economists and the polling firm, we think, have projected that the Labour Party is going to have a 280-seat majority, the highest since the Second World War. So, but we'll watch and see what will happen.
Yes, I mean, Doctor, there is a war in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There is a war in Gaza as well. So from an international perspective, UK's foreign policy is very pivotal to other countries as well. So just how do you think allies and perhaps enemies in quote also would have viewed their debate as well?
Yeah, you are very right on that. The two crises you mentioned now in the Ukraine and the one going on between Israel and the Hamas in Gaza, they are going to play a key role. But I think for the more recent one, which is the crisis in Gaza, I think the two political parties have been able to dance their way around. You know how politicians are. They are very slippery. They are very diplomatic. So people cannot really hold them by the wrist as to where they stand. So I think that has kind of subsided a little bit. Then for the Ukraine, the crisis between Russia and Ukraine, which has been going on for about 2 years and 4 months and all that, the United Kingdom citizens, they tend to support their government. They believe that Russia cannot just annex a sovereign nation like Ukraine. So that one may not have a significant impact on the election. But the Gaza own is a very high touch point. And depending on how the Conservative Party, which currently has the Prime Minister, and the Labour Party, which is the challenger, depending on how what they tell the British people in these final days, which is always very critical in UK elections, that will now determine where the pendulum will swing as far as that Israel-Hamas issue in Gaza is concerned. So it's very dicey, and we are all keeping our fingers crossed.
Absolutely, we are as well here monitoring and following all the developments happening in the UK and all around the world. But just before I'll let you go, because there was a noisy protest outside of where the debate's held. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. So there were noisy protests. People are disenchanted. There are issues about the environment as well, and then the Gaza thing as well. So those are the issues. I think it's a mix of both. How the incoming government will deal with the issue of climate change, and then how the seeming carnage in Gaza will stop. A lot of people believe that the UK government have not been decisive enough putting pressure on Israel. So those are the dynamics that are playing out.
Absolutely, Doctor. I mean, the other issues just before the debate was the fact that the Prime Minister had some internal issues within his party. He had called for the elections earlier than scheduled, and his party members as well were a bit surprised and shocked at that decision by the Prime Minister. But it's about less than a week to go. We'll monitor and see how events unfold as regards the elections in UK. But thank you most kindly for your analysis and commentaries, Dr. Tony Agbon, Senior Lecturer at the Anglia-Ruskin University in London. Thank you as always.
Thank you, Kelly. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. But let's stay with elections, but this time in Iran, where two candidates in the country's presidential election have withdrawn from the race. Campaigning ends ahead of a day of the vote. Ali Reza Zakani, the mayor of the capital, Tehran, said on Thursday that he was backing down. But the first to do so was Emir Hussein Hashemi, the 53-year-old, dropped his candidacy on Wednesday night and urged other candidates to do the same. The snap election will be held tomorrow, Friday, less than 24 hours following the death of President Ibrahim Raisi in an helicopter crash in May. The next presidential vote was scheduled for 2025. Hashemi served as one of Raisi's vice presidents. He ran in the 2021 presidential election and received less than 1 million votes, coming in last position. Two hardliners, former nuclear negotiator Said Jalili and Parliament Speaker Mohammed Galibaf, stand out as front runners in the elections. And away from election stories, pro-government protesters have clashed with the military in La Paz, Bolivia, as they rushed to the presidential palace amid reports of an apparent coup in the city. Footage shows the demonstrators are breaking down a barricade as police blocked a road with riot shields. Fires are seen burning in the streets as officers fired tear gas at the gathering in a bid to quell the unrest. Meanwhile, Bolivian police have arrested the leader of an apparent attempted coup hours after soldiers stormed the presidential palace. The man, Juan Zuniga, claimed he wanted to restructure democracy and that while he respected President Luis Arce, for now there would be a change of government. But he had been relieved of his role after he had made inflammatory comments about Bolivia's former president Evo Morales during an interview. Mr. Morales, who also condemned the coup attempt, is asking the government to bring criminal charges against Gen Zuniga and his accomplices. Let's turn attention now to the war in Gaza, where at least 5 people have been wounded when an alleged Israeli airstrike destroyed a building in the South Lebanese city of Nabatea, according to the country's national news agency. We have footage that shows the aftermath of the strike that flattened a 2-story building in the Masha neighborhood, while dozens of houses nearby were damaged. The agency also reports that rescue teams rushed to the site immediately after the attack, in which 5 people in the vicinity were wounded, with 14 others treated for shock and breathing difficulties in what is the first attack on the province since the flare-up in cross-border strikes in October. Israel has said it does not want war in Lebanon, but could send its neighbors back to the Stone Age, as the United Nations Humanitarian Affairs Chief is warning such a conflict would be, quote, potentially apocalyptic. But the border between the two countries has seen daily exchanges of fire between Israeli forces and the Iran-aligned Lebanese group Hezbollah since the current conflict in Gaza broke out on October 7. In the meantime, Palestinians in Lebanon say they are ready to fight if Israel starts war with Hezbollah. In the Shatila Palestinian refugee camp in Beirut, many people involved in resistance movements say they are not scared and would fight to support Hezbollah and the wider axis of resistance in the region against Israel, but the fear for their families and civilians, worrying that Israel would deliberately target densely populated residential areas in Lebanon, like the Palestinian camps where tens of thousands of people live packed tightly together. Palestinians in Lebanon have watched Israel's assault on Gaza with simmering anger and are now facing the prospects of a similar fate if Israel wages an all-out war against the Lebanese group Hezbollah. Hezbollah began engaging Israel almost immediately after the latter began its war on Gaza, which has killed more than 37,000 people and displaced almost the entire population. And Gaza remains on famine alert after food security experts are warning that more than 1 in 5 households go entire days without eating. Launching the latest on UN-partnered integrated food security phase classification reports on hunger levels, Maximo Torrero, chief economist of the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, said, quote, a high and sustained risk of famine persists across the whole Gaza Strip.
A high and sustained risk of famine persists, so that's very important to underline, across the whole Gaza Strip as long as conflict continues and humanitarian access is restricted. Given the unpredictability of the ongoing conflict and humanitarian access challenges, any significant change may lead to a very rapid deterioration into famine. While the whole territory is classified in emergency, this means IPC Phase 4, latest IPC findings show that around 495,000 people are still facing catastrophic levels of acute food insecurity. This is IPC 5 through September 2024. This represents 22% of the population of the Gaza Strip, or 1 in 5 Gazians. Another 745,000 people, 33%, face emergency conditions. This is IPC 4. The latest data show that on a regular basis, more than half of the population does not have any food to eat in the house, and over 20% going entire days and nights without eating.
As long as there is continuation of hostilities, as long as there are restrictions on access, the risk of famine for the entire Gaza Strip remains real and remains highly significant. In order to have an effective response, 3 things are a must. Number 1, we should have enough commodities, whether commercial, whether humanitarian, coming into Gaza Strip. Number 2, people who are bringing this stuff must be safe. And number 3, people who are receiving these things need to be safe. And if we can make sure of those 3 things, which I don't know how you can do without a ceasefire, then we can improve the situation.
Much for your briefing.
All right, let's turn back to election stories in the U.S. This time it's D-Day as preparations are wrapping up on the Biden-Trump first presidential debate ahead of this year's election. The debate is scheduled to hold at 9 p.m. local time in Atlanta. They have traded babs for months now, but Joe Biden and Donald Trump will soon get a chance to go head-to-head. The Democratic and Republican Party nominees will take the debate stage in Georgia this evening, less than 5 months before the vote on November 5th. Opinion polls suggest that President Biden and ex-President Trump remain locked in a tight race that experts are suggesting could come down to a handful of key swing states. The debate may be the first of the 2024 presidential race, but it will be the 3rd time Trump and Biden have gone head-to-head as presidential hopefuls. They faced off each other, of course, previously in the 2020 elections. Well, let's cross over live to Washington, D.C., where our correspondent Maria Baird joins us live on the program to unpack and make sense of all of this. Maria, great to see you again as always. It's D-Day in the U.S. How's the mood in the States and even across the country as President Joe Biden and Donald Trump prepare to debate yet again, Maria?
Yes, you are correct. They do plan and they're getting ready to debate once again. It is clear that we are preparing for one of the, I think, most important debates for this election cycle. I think this is going to definitely either put President Biden in a direction where he could potentially see a re-election, or it could put the former president in a light that he could see potential victory.
I mean, let's talk about the rules and the formats of these particular debates, because it does appear differently from 2020. So what more can you tell us about the rules?
Well, the rules for the debate are typically that they'll have a few minutes to answer the questions. They will be assigned questions, and there will be one person asking those questions who will be moderating the debate. And then once they have those first questions asked, the other person will have the ability to respond to those. But there will be a very short time frame for rebuttal. There will be no interruptions allowed, obviously ensuring that everyone uses respectful language throughout the debate. And if there are chances and times where it gets a bit heated, the moderator will have the opportunity to bring them back together and to ensure that they are able to come back at a pace of respect throughout the entire debate. So it will be moderated very closely.
And we understand that the debate is scheduled to begin at 9 p.m. local time. But I'm just a bit curious to find out just how interested and invested are residents or Americans in this particular TV debate.
Americans are going to definitely be watching this. There are many Americans that are a bit concerned about what the impending election will look like. Many Americans are undecided. They do understand that they cannot just go without voting, but they're not sure who they should vote for. Obviously, the war in Gaza is creating quite an area of separation amongst Americans, and even within the Democratic Party and obviously the Republican Party as well.
And so we'll talk about the issues in just a moment, but just how essential are televised debates in elections in the U.S., especially presidential elections?
Televised debates are one of the ways in which people make their decision. And so it is obviously hoped for by both campaigns that the candidates come out strong and that they are able to secure those undecided or those who are on the fence or those who are concerned about specific issues, which you're going to definitely see as a focus on some of the very hot button topics right now, which is obviously the right to choose for women, obviously the right for the issues around the war. You're also going to see issues around the amount of money that's being invested with Ukraine and Russia. And you're also going to see issues that are going to surround the economy. The economy continues to be a major area of concern for many Americans.
And I'm just a bit curious. I mean, you have mentioned some of the issues, abortion laws, immigration, the economy as well, in terms of job creation and keeping those figures, inflationary rates to stay at single digits. Well, let's focus on the international perspective, because, I mean, just like the UK debates which held a few hours ago, I'm just wondering how essential are these issues, the war in Ukraine, and of course the war in Gaza, and perhaps a possible Israel-Hezbollah war.
Yes, those conversations are going to be probably taking up quite a bit of the debate time. We know, though, that the former president would not necessarily have very different policy. He might have even harsher policy as it relates to the war in Gaza. And so I think what's going to be paramount for the president is to show that even though there's quite a bit of funding that's going to Israel, that the U.S. has an interest in ensuring the safety of the lives of individuals who are being killed in Gaza. That continues to be a major concern for many Democrats. They don't feel that the current administration is really looking at the lives that are being lost and those individuals in Gaza, the Palestinians.
And Maria, will this be the only debate between President Joe Biden and Donald Trump?
Yes, this is the earliest debate. This is one that is much earlier than what we typically see. We're not even near the fall season, and the primary election is not until November. Normally in the summertime, you don't see these types of debates. But due to, I think, much of what is at stake, I think they're both looking to have an election, a debate about the election a bit sooner.
I mean, I was asking if this is going to be the only debate. Were we expecting another debate?
Yes, we are expecting to have another debate. This is the first one, but there will likely be another one. Obviously, both candidates will have to agree on that. But typically, there's anywhere between 3 to 4 debates, depending on how many. But we know that due to the fact these are the two front runners, we probably will see 2 to 3 debates for this election cycle.
Absolutely. We are looking forward to this particular debate. I mean, the issues are really interesting. Abortion laws, immigration, the inflation in the U.S., as well as other international issues. We know just how essential the foreign policy of the U.S., how essential the U.S. foreign policy is. And allies will be watching and seeing who perhaps they should be in touch with. Maria Baird, Washington, D.C. correspondent, as always, thanks indeed for bringing us up to speed with developments in the U.S. More stories now. Human rights activist and wife to just released WikiLeaks founder says her husband's recovery is a priority after being in a high-security prison for over 5 years. Stella Assange was speaking with newsmen in Canberra, adding that, quote, Julian will always defend human rights. This after Mr. Assange arrived Australia after a 14-year legal battle. Alongside Mrs. Assange, human rights lawyer Jennifer Robinson praised everyone who has joined the team in the fight, emphasizing the importance for international journalists to understand the dangerous precedent that this prosecution has set. Earlier at the U.S. District Courthouse in the Northern Mariana Islands, Assange entered a guilty plea to a single charge of espionage, while the offense carried up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. Judge Ramona Manglona accepted the plea agreement and imposed a sentence time served amounting to the 62 months he spent in the UK's Blemash prison.
The agreement is that he will spend no more time in prison. The terms of the plea deal are, unfortunately, that he, in order to achieve his freedom and to leave the high security prison in Belmarsh, he had to choose to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit espionage for publishing evidence of US war crimes. It's important that journalists all around the world understand the dangerous precedent that this prosecution has set. An award-winning Australian journalist who's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for these publications has spent more than 5 years in a high-security prison because of this extradition request from the United States. This is a huge win for Australia and for Australian democracy.
The only good outcome for the press in general, if the US government had abandoned this case entirely. Now you have the press in a as vulnerable position as Julian has been. I think he'll be pardoned if the press unite to push back against this precedent, because it affects all of you. It affects your future ability to inform the public and to publish without fear.
And for Australian Prime Minister, Mr. Anthony Albanese, he is pleased that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is back home following his release from prison in a US plea deal. While the Prime Minister affirmed that the Australian government will continue to provide assistance to Assange, he also claimed that an overwhelming number of Australians wanted to see the journalist return to the country.
The Australian government continues to provide consular assistance to Mr. Assange as he returns home, as we do to Australians, for Australians right around the world. That I believe overwhelmingly Australians did want to see. As I said, they will have different views about the engagement and the activities of Mr. Assange, but they will be pleased that this saga has been brought to an end and that he will be able to reunite with his family.
Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department says Russia should stop using the U.S. citizens in their custody as bargaining chips. Spokesperson Matthew Miller was reacting to the resumption of Wall Street Journal journalist Ivan Gregovich's trial in Russia on espionage charges. Mr. Miller also commented on Julian Assange's release during a press conference in Washington, D.C. Let's take a listen to him.
Russia should stop using individuals like Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan as bargaining chips. They should both be released immediately, and I can attest to both Evan and Paul and their families that the United States will not rest until we have brought both of them home. The ambassador put out a statement that said we were happy to work with our Australian colleagues on it, and that remains the case. I do think it is important when we talk about Julian Assange to remind the world that the actions for which he was indicted and for which he has now pled guilty are actions that put the lives of our partners, our allies, and our diplomats at risk, especially those who work in dangerous places like Afghanistan and Iraq. This was some years ago now, almost 15 years ago, so I think the world has forgotten much of it. But if you recall, when WikiLeaks first disseminated and published State Department documents, State Department cables, they did so without redacting names. They just threw them out there for the world to see. Those actions put innocent people all around the world in through no fault of their own. And that's, of course, not even to mention the further actions by WikiLeaks down the road to essentially serve as a conduit for Russian intelligence interfering in the U.S. presidential election.
Let's switch gears now to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Pentagon spokesperson Pat Ryder was questioned about the reports that the Joe Biden administration was considering allowing U.S. military contractors in Ukraine to help maintain U.S.-provided weapons during a press briefing in Washington. However, Mr. Ryder says he would not be commenting on such reports. There have been media reports that U.S. authorities were considering lifting the ban on military contractors in Ukraine amid the ongoing conflict with Russia.
Right. Secretary Austin also spoke by phone today with Russian Minister of Defense Andrei Belousov. During the call, the secretary emphasized the importance of maintaining lines of communication amid Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine. The last time Secretary Austin spoke to his Russian counterpart, then Russian Minister of Defense Sergei Shoigu, was on March 15, 2023. A brief readout will be posted to defense.gov. What I'd say right now is just I'm not going to comment on any reports of internal discussions or proposals that may or may not be under consideration. You know, the bottom line is the president and the secretary have been clear that we're not going to send U.S. troops to fight in Ukraine, and that won't change. So I'll just leave it there.
90 Russian servicemen have been released following a prisoner swap with Ukraine. They arrived at Chikalovsky airfield in Moscow. We have videos from the Russian Federation showing the men disembarking from the plane after landing and boarding buses for their return home. The freed men say they will recover and sort out their emotions in a day or two, but they're just free to be happy. They're just happy to be free, rather. On Tuesday, the Russian Defense Ministry reported that 90 Russian servicemen were returned from Kyiv-controlled territory, while 90 Ukrainian soldiers were handed over to Kyiv following negotiations mediated by the United Arab Emirates. The ministry added that the released captives will receive medical and psychological care following their return. Ukrainian President Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky also confirmed the exchange had taken place. And Hungarian Minister for EU Affairs János Boka says Ukraine is very far from meeting the accession criteria for the bloc as he arrived for the General Affairs Council in Luxembourg. This is despite the European Commission announcing that Ukraine and Moldova have met all the preliminary conditions for the start of formal negotiations. Hungary, which is taking over the presidency of the Council of the EU, has previously threatened to block talks as well as additional military aid to Kyiv. Meanwhile, Vera Jourova, Vice President of the EU commission in charge of values and transparency, was asked about Hungary's own Make Europe Great Again mantra for the presidency, and not to former U.S. President Donald Trump's own slogan, and if she was worried. Take a listen to her.
We have another important, I believe, useful discussion with the Hungarian representation about the progress or non-progress. We will see under Article 7. The Commission still has a lot of observations, especially the situation of media in Hungary, the situation around academic freedoms, freedom of association, emergency regime, which still is on after some time. So it's always important to listen, to ask questions. This is the chance for the ministers to know more about the situation in Hungary. I regret we will not see the final decision of the ministers today. Last point, I feel I should inform about everything we did to protect the electoral processes, electoral campaigns. So I will inform the ministers about our current assessment of the situation around the Russian propaganda, about the foreign interference, but we are still collecting data to have the final assessment after summer.
Let's switch gears now to the war in Gaza. A top United Nations official was speaking to the UN Security Council and says that Syria is in a grave crisis and none of its myriad of problems can be sustainably addressed without a political solution. Deputy Special Envoy of the Secretary General for Syria, Najat Rushdie, told the Council that, quote, the voices of Syrians inside and outside need not only to be heard but heeded. Mr. Rushdie described a series of escalatory incidents, including airstrikes attributed to Israel in Aleppo and southern Syria, missile strikes attributed to pro-government forces in the northwest, drone strikes as well attributed to Turkey in northeast Syria, and 3 Russian airstrikes near Al-Tanf, violent clashes in Sweden, as well as rocket attacks on government security installations.
Syria is in grave crisis and none of its myriad problems can be sustainably addressed without a political solution. The voices of Syrians inside and outside need not only to be heard but heeded. Many Syrians are living in a climate of fear because of the security situation, which continues to be tense and violent. Syrians need unimpeded aid access through all modalities, cross-border and cross-line. We are seeing repeated denials for cross-line convoys by parties across all Syria, depriving communities from life-saving aid, including in Rukban camp, where the situation is particularly dire.
Syria is facing its highest levels of humanitarian need since the start of this 13-year crisis, and the situation only continues to deteriorate as each month passes. The need for conditions more conducive to an efficient humanitarian response has never been greater. This requires absolute respect for international humanitarian law, including the protection of civilians and unhindered humanitarian access. It also requires sufficient resources so we can continue to provide critical assistance to the millions of people who need it.
And local Taliban authorities in the eastern Pakistan province has reported a landslide in Samkani district, killing 7 members of a family, all of whom were women and children. The head of the Taliban Natural Disaster Management Department in the province, Nasara Ahmed Najat, said that the incident occurred in the village of Orgor in the district on Sunday, June 23. According to the Taliban authorities, the incident resulted in the deaths of 2 women and 5 children, along with significant financial losses for the family. This comes amidst a series of natural disasters in Afghanistan in recent months, including earthquakes, flash floods, and landslides, which have claimed hundreds of lives, causing extreme and intensive damage for local residents. The International Criminal Court, ICC, has convicted an Al-Qaeda-linked extremist leader of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Mali. Al-Mahmoud is accused particularly for abusing prisoners as the de facto chief of the Islamic police in the capital, Timbuktu. Judges read out the verdict on the many other charges for his alleged role in insurgents' reign of terror, including rape, torture, persecution, enforced marriages, and sexual slavery. He faces up to life imprisonment when a sentence is handed down at a later date.
Based on the analysis of the evidence adduced and considered at trial, as set out in the judgment of the Chamber, the Chamber finds Mr. Al-Hassan guilty of crimes against humanity and war crimes. As detailed out in the judgment of the Chamber, Mr. Al-Hassan is guilty as follows: on the basis of Articles 25(3)(a), C, and 25(3)(d) of the statute. Of 1. Crimes against humanity and war crimes of torture, and 2. War crimes, outrages upon personal dignity. On the basis of Article 25(3)(d) of the statute.
Let's see here in the continent, Chinese ambassador in South Africa, Wu Peng, has emphasized the importance of building sustainable and mutually beneficial relationships. Peng highlighted the potential for South African companies to leverage China's vast market and for Chinese companies to invest in South Africa's diverse economic landscape. He made these remarks at the Beijing South Africa Business Cooperation Promotion Conference in Johannesburg, co-hosted by the China Council for the Promotion of International Trade, the Beijing Chamber of International Commerce, and the China Council for the Promotion of International Trade Representative Office in South Africa. Our SA correspondent Innocent Semosa tells us about it.
The discussions are centered around growing economic partnership between China and South Africa. The ambassador of the Republic of the People of China in South Africa, Wu Peng, says the conference aimed to enhance bilateral trade and investment opportunities.
China and South Africa are called to the same goal on development and security, international order, and the global governance. We understand and support each other as always.
Meanwhile, Premier of Gauteng, Panyaza Lesufi, says this should not only be a talk shop.
We come here with one message and one message only. Let's make this relationship a reality. We come here with one message and one message only. Time of talk, it's over. It's time of action, so that we can deal with it.
The event featured a series of activities designed to promote cooperation, including an investment promotion session, a signing ceremony, and business talk between Beijing and South African companies. Attendees told Channels Television that the program provided a platform for businesses from both countries to explore new opportunities, forge partnerships, and discuss potential collaborations.
These types of events bolster what provincial governments are trying to do, which is to connect people. So for me, such events are very, very crucial in unlocking opportunities, in unlocking networks, in unlocking experience.
Well, I think, especially like in other sectors, like especially in construction and the medical field, I think it's very important. Like we see in the rest of Africa, like I travel to other countries in Africa, you see a lot of good that the Chinese businesses and the government is doing.
We're hoping to link up with potential importers, especially on this conference. We have investors coming in. They're looking for a logistics partner that has presence here and in China, and want to represent them and partner with the local businesses that are established here already.
Attendees say the Beijing South Africa Business Corporation Promotion Conference has set the stage for a new chapter in the economic relationship between the two nations. Now, the collaborative efforts seen today are expected to lead to increased trade, investment, and shared prosperity in the coming years. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
To other stories now, according to data from Statistics South Africa, the total employment declined by 0.6% quarter-on-quarter in December 2023. The drop was driven by declines in key sectors, including trade, community services, business services, and mining, while the electricity sector saw no change. However, there were gains in manufacturing, transport, and construction industries. The stats, according to SA's director responsible for quarterly employment survey, Motlan Pasove, says the year-on-year figures, total employment decreased by 0.7% from March 2023 to March 2024. And a three-day International Defense Electronics Exhibition has kicked off in Beijing, showcasing the latest innovations in military technologies and Chinese defense capabilities. On display, as we can see here, are military vehicles, aircrafts, and equipment models at the exhibition in Beijing. Visitors can be seen examining the models, shooting at digital targets, and using driving simulators. Around 40,000 people are expected to attend this year's exhibition, according to local media. Approximately 400 exhibitors are also participating in the event, which is located in an area of about 30,000 square meters. The CIDEX exhibition was organized by the China Electronics Information Industry Group in cooperation with the Equipment Development Department of the Central Military Commission. The program aims to showcase independent innovations in national defense technology, and the event has been held in China every 2 years since 1998 and is supported by the government as well as several military industrial groups. And still talking tech, artificial intelligence lecturers have been introduced as part of a program developed by the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Using AI-generated tools, students can now enjoy virtual anime teachers to enhance their learning experience. Wearing virtual reality headsets, as we have on the screen, in a green-painted pavilion, they watch an AI-generated Albert Einstein gave a lecture, and several anime characters can also be seen taking part in the lesson. The students say this digital course helps them pay more attention, especially because a physical teacher is boring. In the long term, the university aims to create a personalized AI classroom tailored to each student's interests and preferences.
During this method, maybe sometimes you will feel the physical teacher is boring, but in the digital course, you will think it's fantastic and interesting. You will pay more your attention in this course.
For example, at least a new face, or also you can actually integrate all the different information, videos, data, graph, and charts, seamlessly presented to the student. And I think the AI involvement with the multimedia the content will be better than just I taught using PowerPoint. Yeah.
Somehow, I think for a lot of us, different students have different learning progress and learning habits. Digital teachers kind of like providing you a personalized learning methodologies in which you can follow your path. Some students saying is actually a very good place for introvert because they don't want to attend the class with a lot of student and distraction beside. So getting into the classroom with only one person to the digital teachers talking to you, they feel like it is much better.
Well, AI has come to stay. I bet you may want such an experience in a learning environment. I'm looking forward to you. Dorit, are you? That's the program, everyone. Thanks indeed for watching. I am Kelly Egiga here in Lagos, Nigeria. Bye now.